Marcus revetted his custom Harley-Davidson outside the quaint London cafe, the chrome exhaust pipes gleaming under the afternoon sun. At 28, he had built his entire identity around his motorcycle and the leather jacket that never left his shoulders. The Phoenix Riders patch on his back meant everything to him, even though the club consisted of only 6 members who spent more time polishing their bikes than actually riding them. The cafe district of Hampstead Heath was the perfect hunting ground for Marcus. Wealthy dog owners strolled leisurely with their pampered pets, completely oblivious to the world around them. These people represented everything Marcus despised about London's elite. Their designer clothes, expensive coffee habits, and ridiculous attachment to their 4-legged companions made his blood boil. Today felt different, though. Marcus had just been rejected for another job, this time as a mechanic at a high-end garage. The manager had taken one look at his tattoos and dismissed him before he could even speak. The humiliation still burned fresh in his mind as he watched the stream of well-dressed pedestrians walking past his bike. 2 golden retrievers caught his attention immediately. They were magnificent animals, clearly well cared for and probably worth more than his monthly rent. Their owner was nowhere to be seen, likely inside ordering some overpriced artisanal beverage. The dogs waited patiently outside, their leashes tied to an ornate iron bench. Marcus felt the familiar surge of anger and resentment building in his chest. These people had everything handed to them while he struggled to make ends meet. Their dogs lived better lives than most humans he knew. Something inside him snapped as he watched the golden retrievers sitting so peacefully, so trusting. He dismounted his bike with theatrical flair, making sure his boots hit the pavement with authority. Several passers-by glanced in his direction, which only fueled his desire to make a statement. Marcus had always been a performer at heart, craving attention and validation even when he pretended to hate society. The first golden retriever, a beautiful female with a thick coat, looked up at him with curious brown eyes. There was no fear in her expression, only the innocent trust that comes from a lifetime of kindness from humans. This trust would prove to be her mistake, and Marcus's downfall. Walking toward the dogs with exaggerated swagger, Marcus began to attract more attention from the cafe patrons. Through the large windows, he could see people starting to notice the leather-clad figure approaching the 2 defenseless animals. Some reached for their phones, sensing that something dramatic was about to unfold. Marcus had never actually hurt an animal before, but the rage inside him demanded action. These dogs represented everything he couldn't have, everything that society had denied him. In his twisted logic, striking out at them would somehow balance the scales of injustice he felt pressing down on his shoulders. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone street as Marcus positioned himself directly in front of the golden retrievers. His steel-toed boots gleamed menacingly, and his leather gloves creaked as he flexed his fingers. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and Marcus was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. What he didn't know was that someone very dangerous was watching him from inside the cafe. Someone who had spent decades learning how to hurt people who deserved it. Someone who loved those 2 dogs more than his own life, and who would stop at nothing to protect them from harm. The golden retrievers remained calm and trusting, their tails wagging slightly as they looked up at the approaching stranger. They had no way of knowing that their peaceful afternoon was about to explode into violence, or that their owner was already moving toward the door with deadly intent in his eyes. Marcus drew back his right leg, savoring the moment before impact. The cafe crowd had grown silent, phones now openly recording as they realized what was about to happen. The golden retriever closest to him tilted her head in confusion, still unable to comprehend that this human meant her harm. The steel-toed boot connected with the dog's ribs with a sickening thud. She yelped in pain and terror, stumbling backward as far as her leash would allow. Her companion immediately moved to shield her, positioning his larger body between Marcus and the injured female. The protective instinct displayed by the male dog only enraged Marcus further. "Stupid mutts," Marcus snarled, loud enough for everyone to hear, living better than real people deserve to live. His voice carried the bitter edge of years of accumulated resentment and disappointment. Several cafe patrons gasped audibly, and someone shouted for him to stop. Marcus kicked again, this time catching the male retriever in the shoulder. The dog didn't retreat, but instead let out a deep, mournful howl that seemed to echo off every building in the district. It was a sound that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life, though he didn't know it yet. Inside the cafe, Jason Statham had been enjoying a quiet moment between film shoots. At 45, the action star had learned to cherish these peaceful interludes in his chaotic schedule. He'd been reading a script while sipping his coffee, completely absorbed in the character he would soon bring to life on screen. The sound of his dogs crying in pain cut through everything else like a blade through silk. Jason's head snapped up from his script, his trained eyes immediately scanning the street through the large window. What he saw made his blood turn to ice in his veins. Years of performing his own stunts had given Jason reflexes that bordered on superhuman. He was out of his chair and moving toward the door before his brain had fully processed what was happening. The script fluttered to the floor as he abandoned his peaceful afternoon for something much darker. Marcus was preparing for a third kick when he noticed the commotion inside the cafe. Through the window, he could see a figure moving with predatory grace toward the exit. Something about the man's movement pattern made Marcus pause, though he couldn't quite identify what had triggered his survival instincts. The cafe door exploded open with such force that the brass handle embedded itself in the brick wall behind it. Jason emerged like a force of nature, his usually calm demeanor replaced by something primal and terrifying. His eyes locked onto Marcus with laser focus, and suddenly the biker felt like prey for the first time in his adult life. "Step away from my dogs." Jason's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than Marcus had ever heard in his life. The accent was distinctly English, cultured but with an underlying edge that promised violence. This wasn't a request or a warning. It was a final opportunity to avoid complete destruction. Marcus recognized the face immediately. Every person in London would have recognized those features, made famous by countless action films and magazine covers. Jason Statham stood 15 feet away, and Marcus had just assaulted his beloved pets in front of dozens of witnesses. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow to the stomach. This wasn't just some wealthy dog owner who would file a police report and forget about it. This was a man who had built his career on playing characters who destroyed people for far less serious offenses. This was someone who actually possessed the skills his movie characters displayed. Marcus tried to speak, to offer some excuse or apology, but his voice had abandoned him completely. The golden retrievers cowered behind Jason's legs, seeking comfort from their protector while keeping fearful eyes on their attacker. Their trust in their owner was absolute, and they knew that safety had arrived. The crowd of onlookers had grown significantly, with people emerging from shops and restaurants to witness what was clearly about to become a legendary confrontation. Phones captured every angle as Marcus stood frozen in terror, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Jason took a single step forward, and Marcus felt his knees begin to buckle. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Marcus felt sweat pooling under his leather jacket despite the cool London air. Jason Statham stood motionless, but Marcus could see the calculation happening behind those steel gray eyes. This was a man who had spent decades learning how to hurt people efficiently, and Marcus had just given him every reason to use those skills. "Do you know who I am?" Jason's question cut through the tension like a scalpel. His voice remained unnaturally calm, which somehow made it infinitely more threatening than if he had been shouting. The crowd pressed closer, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Marcus nodded frantically, his voice still trapped somewhere in his throat. Of course he knew who Jason Statham was. Everyone in Britain knew that face, had watched him demolish countless villains on the big screen. But those were just movies, weren't they? The man standing before him seemed far more dangerous than any character he had ever played. "Then you understand what happens next?" Jason continued, taking another measured step forward. Marcus instinctively stepped backward, bumping into his motorcycle and nearly knocking it over. The sound of chrome hitting pavement seemed impossibly loud in the hushed street. The golden retrievers had begun to recover from their shock, though they remained pressed against Jason's legs. The female was limping slightly, and Marcus could see a dark bruise forming along her golden coat where his boot had connected. The sight of the injury seemed to increase the intensity of Jason's stare exponentially. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as little more than a croak. "I didn't know. I wasn't thinking." The words sounded pathetic even to his own ears. "How do you explain to someone that you attacked their innocent pets because you were angry at the world? You weren't thinking." Jason repeated slowly as if testing the words for truth. So you decided to take out your frustrations on defenseless animals? Each word was delivered with precision, like hammer blows designed to drive home the magnitude of Marcus's crime. The crowd had grown to nearly 50 people now, with more arriving every minute. Someone had clearly called the police because Marcus could hear sirens in the distance, but he suspected the authorities would be the least of his problems. Jason Statham looked like a man who preferred to handle his own justice. Marcus glanced desperately at the faces surrounding him, hoping to find sympathy or support. Instead, he saw only disgust and anticipation. These people wanted to see him pay for what he had done, and they were perfectly happy to let Jason Statham be the instrument of that payment. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, though the apology felt hollow and inadequate. "I'm really sorry. I was just having a bad day and He trailed off as Jason raised one hand, silencing him with a gesture that spoke of absolute authority. "A bad day," Jason repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You were having a bad day, so you decided to kick my dogs?" The question hung in the air like a blade suspended over Marcus's neck. "Do you have any idea what these animals mean to me?" Marcus shook his head, unable to form words. He could see genuine pain in Jason's eyes now, mixed with the rage. These weren't just pets to him, they were family. Marcus had attacked someone's family members, and now he would face the consequences. Jason knelt down beside his dogs, running gentle hands over their coats to check for serious injuries. The female whimpered softly but didn't pull away from his touch. The male nuzzled against Jason's shoulder, seeking comfort and reassurance. The tender moment between man and animals made Marcus's crime seem even more heinous. 12 years, Jason said quietly, still examining his pets. "I've had these dogs for 12 years. They've been with me through everything: divorces, career changes, family deaths. They've never hurt anyone, never asked for anything except love and protection." The sirens were getting closer now, but Jason seemed oblivious to their approach. He stood slowly, his movements fluid and controlled. When he looked at Marcus again, there was something new in his expression. A cold, calculating fury that made Marcus's blood turn to ice. "And you thought you had the right to hurt them," Jason continued, taking another step forward. Marcus found himself completely paralyzed, unable to run or fight or even speak. This was what it felt like to be prey, he realized. This was what his victims had felt like in the past when he had used his size and reputation to intimidate others. The crowd held its collective breath as Jason closed the distance between them. Marcus could smell the actor's cologne, could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow from some long-ago stunt. This close, Jason Statham wasn't a movie star. He was simply a very dangerous man who had been pushed too far. Jason's hand moved faster than Marcus could track, gripping the front of his leather jacket and lifting him partially off the ground. For a man of average height, Jason possessed surprising strength, the kind that came from years of physical training and stunt work. Marcus found himself staring directly into those famous gray eyes, now burning with controlled fury. "Look at me," Jason commanded, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow audible to everyone in the crowd. "Look at what you've done." He turned Marcus slightly so he could see the golden retrievers, both still trembling from their ordeal. The female was holding her injured leg at an awkward angle, and Marcus felt a stab of genuine remorse for the first time. Marcus tried to speak, to offer another apology, but Jason's grip tightened on his jacket. "No," the actor said firmly. "You don't get to talk anymore. You had your chance to be a decent human being, and you chose to attack innocent creatures instead." The police sirens were much closer now, probably only a few blocks away. Marcus felt a desperate hope that their arrival might save him from whatever Jason had planned, but the look in the actor's eyes suggested that a few minutes was more than enough time to deliver the lesson Marcus desperately needed to learn. "You want to know something about bullies?" Jason asked, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than his anger had been. "They always pick on those who can't fight back. Dogs, children, people smaller than them, but they never expect to meet someone who can actually hurt them." Marcus was vaguely aware of phones recording every moment of his humiliation. By tomorrow, this footage would be all over social media and the news. His face would be known throughout London as the coward who attacked Jason Statham's dogs. The thought made him feel sick to his stomach. Jason released his grip suddenly and Marcus stumbled backward, nearly falling over his motorcycle again. But the actor wasn't finished with him. He began to circle Marcus like a predator, his movements fluid and precise. Every step was calculated to increase Marcus's fear and demonstrate just how outmatched he was. 12 years ago, I adopted these dogs from a shelter, Jason said as he circled. They were just puppies then, abandoned and scared. Do you know what I promised them when I took them home? Marcus shook his head frantically. I promised them that nobody would ever hurt them again. The crowd was completely silent now, mesmerized by the display of controlled menace. Jason Statham had always been convincing in his action roles, but this was different. This was real, personal, and infinitely more dangerous than anything Hollywood could produce. Marcus felt his legs beginning to shake uncontrollably. He had never been in a real fight in his life. All of his intimidation tactics had relied on his appearance and reputation. Facing someone who actually knew how to hurt people was a completely new experience, and he was terrified. You broke my promise to them, Jason continued, still circling. You violated their trust, their safety, their peace. And for what? Because you were angry? Because you wanted to feel powerful? Each question was punctuated by another step, another degree of the circle that was slowly closing around Marcus. The police cars were turning onto their street now, their sirens wailing and lights flashing. Marcus could see the relief on some faces in the crowd. They wanted to see him punished, but they also didn't want to witness actual violence. Jason noticed the approaching authorities as well, but his expression didn't change. They're here to save you, Jason observed casually, but they can't protect you from what you've already done to yourself. He stopped circling and faced Marcus directly. You see, I'm not going to hurt you. I don't need to. Marcus blinked in confusion. After all the buildup, all the menace and intimidation, Jason Statham was just going to let him go? It didn't make sense, and the anticlimax left him feeling even more unsettled than the threats had. Jason smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. You've already destroyed yourself, Marcus. You just don't realize it yet. The use of his name made Marcus's blood freeze. How did Jason know his name? Had someone in the crowd recognized him? The police cars pulled up to the scene with a screech of tires and a chorus of slamming doors. Officers immediately began dispersing the crowd and assessing the situation. But Jason remained focused entirely on Marcus, his smile growing wider and somehow more terrifying. You see, Jason said quietly, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. I know exactly who you are now, and after today everyone else will too. The police officers took control of the scene with professional efficiency, but the damage to Marcus's life was already spreading like wildfire through social media. Dozens of phones had captured every moment of his attack on the dogs and subsequent confrontation with Jason Statham. Within minutes, the videos were being shared across every platform imaginable. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen was the first officer to approach Jason, her expression respectful but authoritative. She had clearly recognized the actor immediately, but her priority was understanding what had happened to his dogs. Jason calmly explained the situation while gently comforting his injured pets. His voice steady despite the rage that Marcus could still see burning in his eyes. Marcus found himself handcuffed and seated in the back of a police car, watching through the window as a veterinarian arrived to examine the golden retrievers. The female was indeed injured, though thankfully not seriously. The sight of her limping as she was led to the vet's mobile clinic made Marcus feel genuinely sick for the first time since the whole ordeal began. Detective Chen approached Marcus's police car and opened the door. Marcus Thompson, 28 years old, unemployed, she read from her notepad. Multiple complaints filed against you for intimidating behavior, but no prior convictions. She looked at him with undisguised contempt. Well, that's about to change dramatically. Through the car window, Marcus could see Jason giving interviews to the growing crowd of reporters who had arrived on the scene. The actor's media training was evident as he spoke calmly and eloquently about animal cruelty, personal responsibility, and the importance of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Every word was perfectly chosen to destroy what was left of Marcus's reputation. Marcus's phone, which had been confiscated by the police, was buzzing constantly with notifications. Detective Chen held it up so he could see the screen. You're famous, Marcus. #1 trending topic on Twitter. The hashtag is BikerBully, in case you were wondering. Her smile was cold and professional. You've got about 2 million views so far. The reality of his situation began to sink in as Marcus watched the media circus growing around him. This wasn't just a local incident that would blow over in a few days. This was national news, international news. Jason Statham was a global celebrity, and Marcus had attacked his beloved pets in front of dozens of cameras. His mother's phone number was probably already being found by internet detectives. His address, his employment history, his social media posts, everything about his life would be dissected and broadcast to the world. The Phoenix Riders Motorcycle Club would certainly disown him to avoid the negative publicity. He would be unemployable, unmarketable, completely toxic to anyone who might have offered him help. Detective Chen continued reading from her notes. Mr. Statham has decided not to press charges for the threats you made against him, but he is pursuing the maximum penalties for animal cruelty. The RSPCA is also filing charges, and several animal rights groups are calling for you to be banned from owning pets for life. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. How long will I go to prison for this? The question had been eating at him since the handcuffs clicked shut, but he had been too afraid to ask. Animal cruelty with aggravating circumstances? Detective Chen consulted her notepad again. You're looking at up to 5 years plus substantial fines. The fact that it was recorded and went viral will definitely work against you in sentencing. Judges don't like people who make them look soft on crime. Through the police car window, Marcus could see Jason loading his dogs into a luxury SUV. The animals appeared to be moving better now that they had received medical attention, but Marcus knew the psychological trauma would last much longer. Dogs remembered cruelty, and he had probably destroyed their trust in strangers forever. Jason walked over to the police car before leaving, tapping gently on the window until Detective Chen rolled it down. He leaned down so he could look directly at Marcus, his expression unreadable. You wanted attention today, he said quietly. Well, now you have it. I hope it was worth it. The words hit Marcus harder than any physical blow could have. Jason was right. This had all been about attention, about feeling powerful and important for a few minutes. Now he had more attention than he could ever have wanted, and it would follow him for the rest of his life. As Jason's SUV pulled away from the scene, Marcus caught a glimpse of the golden retrievers in the back seat. They were pressed close together, still seeking comfort from each other after their traumatic experience. The sight made Marcus realize that he wasn't just facing legal consequences. He had genuinely harmed innocent creatures who had done nothing to deserve his anger. Detective Chen closed the car door and walked away to finish her paperwork. Marcus was alone with his thoughts as the media circus continued to grow around him. His phone was still buzzing with notifications. His life was being destroyed in real time, and somewhere in London, Jason Statham was probably holding his injured dogs and planning how to make sure justice was served. The worst part was knowing that he had brought all of this on himself, with one moment of stupidity and rage. 6 months later, Marcus sat in his tiny bedsit in East London, staring at yet another rejection email on his laptop screen. The one-room apartment was all he could afford after losing his previous flat, and the walls seemed to close in on him more each day. The window faced a brick wall, blocking out most of the natural light and leaving him in perpetual gloom. The trial had been a media sensation that lasted for weeks. Marcus's defense attorney had tried to argue for leniency, based on his difficult childhood and recent unemployment. But the prosecution had painted him as a symbol of everything wrong with modern society. The judge, clearly aware that the entire country was watching, had sentenced him to 18 months in prison with the possibility of parole after 9 months. Prison had been a nightmare that Marcus preferred not to think about. His crime had made him famous among the other inmates, but not in a good way. Even hardened criminals looked down on people who hurt animals, and Marcus had spent most of his sentence in protective custody to avoid being attacked himself. The golden retrievers had recovered completely from their physical injuries, according to the updates that Jason Statham posted on his social media accounts. The actor had used the incident to launch a campaign for stronger animal cruelty laws, and Marcus's face had become the poster child for why such legislation was necessary. Marcus had been released 3 months ago, but freedom felt almost worse than imprisonment. At least in jail, everyone expected him to be there. Out here, he was a pariah trying to rebuild a life that had been completely destroyed by 15 minutes of stupidity. His phone buzzed with a notification from the job search app he had been using. Another rejection, this time from a minimum wage position at a fast food restaurant. The manager had recognized his name from the background check and decided that having the dog-kicking guy on staff would be bad for business. The internet never forgot, and Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way. The videos of his attack on Jason Statham's dogs had been viewed millions of times across multiple platforms. His name was permanently associated with animal cruelty in the minds of the public, and no amount of time or apologies could change that fact. He had tried therapy, anger management classes, and volunteering at animal shelters, but none of it mattered to potential employers. The moment they Googled his name, they saw the headlines and decided he was too much of a liability to hire. Even his own family had largely disowned him, unable to handle the shame and negative attention. Marcus picked up the letter that had arrived that morning from his probation officer. He was required to attend weekly meetings for the next year, and any violation of his parole conditions would send him back to prison immediately. The restrictions on his life were numerous. He couldn't leave London without permission, couldn't own any pets, and had to submit to random home inspections. His laptop chimed with an email notification, and Marcus felt his heart sink as he recognized the sender. It was from a tabloid journalist who had been trying to interview him for months, offering money for his side of the story. The amount mentioned would pay his rent for several months, but Marcus knew that any interview would only bring more negative attention and make his situation worse. He walked to the small mirror above his sink and stared at his reflection. The confident, arrogant man who had kicked those dogs 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone hollow and broken. The leather jacket hung in his wardrobe unworn, a reminder of the person he used to pretend to be. His motorcycle had been sold to pay legal fees, along with most of his other possessions. Marcus thought about Jason Statham often, wondering if the actor ever thought about him or if the whole incident had become just another story in his successful career. The dogs were probably living their best lives, surrounded by love and protection, while Marcus struggled to find anyone willing to give him a chance at redemption. The afternoon news was playing on his small television, and Marcus recognized the interviewer's voice discussing animal welfare legislation. He looked up to see Jason Statham on screen, articulate and passionate as he spoke about the new laws that had been passed partly because of Marcus's crime. The actor looked healthy and successful, while Marcus felt like a ghost haunting his own life. As the interview concluded, Jason looked directly into the camera and spoke about forgiveness and second chances. But Marcus knew those words weren't meant for him. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, hurt creatures that didn't deserve his anger, and destroyed his own future in the process. The sun was setting outside his narrow window, casting long shadows across his cramped room. Marcus closed his laptop and lay down on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine a future where he might somehow rebuild his life. But every path forward seemed blocked by the consequences of that one terrible moment when he had chosen cruelty over compassion. In another part of London, 2 golden retrievers were probably playing in a beautiful garden, loved and protected by their famous owner. Marcus closed his eyes and tried not to think about what might have been if he had just walked away that day, if he had chosen to be better instead of bitter. But some lessons came too late, and some mistakes could never be undone.